Hello, I'm Bill Wilson. I'm the Vice President of Digital Strategy and Business Development for digitalmusic.org. We're a trade organization representing the music commerce community and startups in their business dealings with the record labels and the publishers and the performing rights organizations. And we are here at Austin Tech Talk on the LiveMusicStage platform. And I am talking, right, LiveMusicStage. And we are talking with Scott Ambrose Riley from X5 Music Group on about critical industry issues such as South by Southwest, and then addressing the issues of scale in the music business. So Scott, before we get started, tell us a little bit about your career in the business, your long, sort of complicated and circuitous path to your lofty position right now.
I started out in the music business in 1986 as road manager for artist Mojo Nixon, who Mojo did the second keynote address at South by Southwest, and so I spent 3.5 years on the road with Mojo, and then moved to New York to start a management company. Mojo, one of my clients, managed Dash Rip Rock, Eric Gamble, Fred Eaglesmith, but and what was lucky with Mojo is he was doing all sorts of different media, and then I also was lucky enough to manage a band called God Street Wine, who was one of the very early jam bands, which also meant a very college and tech-savvy audience. So a lot of people don't know that the band Fish co-funded with Brown University a server to sit on the Brown campus in the early 90s called FishNet.
Oh, wow.
And all the bands could use it for their bulletin boards and their email lists and all that kind of stuff. So even prior to there being a World Wide Web, we were selling tickets to shows using the internet. We were doing IRC backstage chats using the internet. I think we had a website up in 1994. So very early and kept slugging it out managing bands all through the 90s, which is just a horrible, horrible way to spend your life, managing bands. I should confess
So the advice to the community
don't
is
manage bands. But I do still manage Mojo Nixon, so I guess you could
You're
say
a lifer.
I'm a recovering band manager. So got very involved in digital music and what it meant and how to use it as promotion and a sales tool. And then when I realized managing bands wasn't going to be for me, to make the transition, it was easy to make the transition over to digital. And my first, at the time I couldn't even say the word job, I would only spell it in the business, was a digital club network, helping launch that network of clubs around the country. And when Club Network got acquired by Dimensional Associates, they also acquired eMusic and rolled those in. And then I ended up running the content acquisition, label relations, operations departments for eMusic, and then got recruited by Amazon to help them launch their MP3 store, running those same departments, content acquisition and label relations and operations, and launching the US business and the UK and Germany and France. And then I was recruited by X5 to be the CEO of their North American business. And X5 focuses on creating products that help in discovery of back catalog and creating products optimized for the digital marketplace. So it's really about trying to make it easy for people to find new music that they might not be that aware of. So that's my history. I've been coming here to South by Southwest. I've missed a few years, but the majority of the years since 1987.
So tell us a little bit about, because you've been coming here for so long to the event that is South by Southwest, some people comment that it's changed, right? And the people who are kind of lifers or long time participants in the event kind of have seen it grow exponentially, and it's been great for the town of Austin. And how do you see about that an attendee can kind of optimize their experience, or do you see the evolution of South by Southwest and someone who wants to have that indie feel experience, can you still have it at this point?
Yeah, I found myself this year arguing with a lot of people about it's bigger isn't ruined. People say I can't go, it's too big, I'm too tired. I think they're just old, or they don't, or they just don't have enough energy, because it's grown. It's amazing when it's grown. The whole thing used to take place in one hotel room. I mean, in one hotel, and everything happened there, and there were no daytime parties. And it's evolved in days, in scope, in topics. It's just overwhelming. But if you want to have a small experience, just don't leave South Congress or that whole new area over behind the ironworks. And you could just go to South Congress and forget that there's bands at Stubbs, forget that Prince might be playing, and just go see the bands down there. You could go see Ian Moore, at the Continental Club on Friday night, and don't go get in line at Stubbs. Don't go, down to 6th Street. Just stay there, and it'll feel very much like South by Southwest of '92. One of the great things about South is there's more choice. There's bigger things to see, but you don't have to make those choices. So anybody who's complaining about it's too big, it's because they're trying to do the cool thing or the hip thing or the big thing. There's many small experiences. I love South Congress. I stay down at the Hotel San Jose. I end most of my nights at the Continental Club, Driving and Crying's playing the Continental Club tonight. That'll be great, and there's some of the bands that we're playing, but there's still young, new bands playing in a lot of the clubs. Joe's, the parking lot at the San Jose Hotel has great bands all the time. So, if South by Southwest has grown, if you think it's grown too big for yourself, I think it's a lack of discipline. I think it's a lack of imagination. South by Southwest, the way South by Southwest is a great event is the number of artists who want to come here every year.
Right.
Artists who are adamant that artists need to get paid, etc. Artists who have very strong feelings. They like being here because it's fun for them. They see their friends. They're happy to play 3 shows.
It's the artist-to-artist connection too that is very much unfounded at a lot of other events.
Yeah, Mojo loves coming here. He doesn't like to do much of anything, that isn't fun and exciting. He loves to come here. It's exciting. There's a lot to do. A lot of people to see. Friends you don't see otherwise. As I say, there's a lot of people I have known for 20 years.
Right.
If it wasn't for South by Southwest, they would be people I knew 20 years ago. Because I see them here. People, concert promoter in San Francisco who I happen to have the same tastes as, so I see them at a lot of shows every year.
And you've maintained that relationship because South by Southwest is that sort of point where you guys always meet and you're always going to see each other, and that's where you catch up.
Yeah, and I find it, some years are not as fun as others. That has nothing to do with size. That just has to do with sort of random chance, so I find it to be, still a great event, and the people are happy here, and they're happy. There's a lot of different food choices. The weather's usually good, so there's a lot of ancillary things that make it fun, and the number of artists who like to come tells you there's something exciting going on.
So, we've kind of talked a little bit about the event. We've talked a little bit about your, career. And I want to kind of jump into the conversation specifically right now about X5 and what you're doing with the company, and talking about one of the biggest problems that we have in the business seems to be that of scale. When you talk to all these companies, a lot of executives are always talking about how do we get, in your words that we talked about before we started the interview, how do we achieve scale? How do you get the person who bought the Adele CD to kind of buy more music? How do we scale the business? And so as you look at it both from the perspective of X5 on the classical side, which is obviously an interesting kind of genre to grow scale in, and then on the industry side, how do you feel about that? So start with X5 and then we'll kind of go
classical is where we've had
discussion.
Great success by creating packages that were great starters for people who would never check the box, I'm a classical music customer. We've sold a lot of classical music to people who would never identify themselves as classical. We're now doing the same in blues and jazz and world. And it works because people don't know where to start. One of the problems with the digital music business, and I've been in it about as early as you can be in it, is its focus. The starting point is hard. I'm worried the digital music business is leaving the casual music buyer behind, the Susan Boyle buyers.
Right.
I think the industry is populated with people who maybe aren't think Susan Boyle is cool, and it's populated by people who are really deep in music, and I think that you can go to see a lot of panels and a lot of talks about a lot of discussions about how to sell more music to big music fans. And I think there really needs to be a discussion about how to sell some music to small music fans, where they don't have to download an app to get started,
right.
Where they don't have, so you see Susan Boyle on, on TV. If it's a CD, you're going to see it in Target, you're going to see it in Walmart, or where there are CDs. What are you going to do if it's all digital. Where are you going to go? There's nothing for the person. A lot of people, 2 to 3 CDs a year. Where are those people going to go to get that equivalent amount of music and that value for music without having to make a giant commitment in their life?
Well, yeah, and one of the studies that we've recently done, it's now about a year old, but our organization commissioned a study about music discovery, and 3,000 individuals kind of self-reported about their music discovery habits and what they do afterwards and how they buy, and some of the results were really, really interesting, because we had, this again from the self-reported individuals, the top box of music fans of about, the top, I'd say, it's not necessarily the 80-20 rule, but it was more like the 70-40 rule, where 70% of the revenue is provided by the super fan and the people who are actively engaged in music, and everything else kind of like went down, and people wouldn't actually execute to purchase. Farther down the food chain, after discovery of music on a terrestrial radio or on TV, they would either wait to hear it on the radio again, stream it on YouTube, but the actual intent to purchase was much farther down the line for those less engaged customers.
And what was it in CD? What was that ratio in CD?
With respect to the conversion to, because of the lack of floor space now dedicated to music, people weren't
but what did it used to be in the height of the CD business? What percentage was the casual buyer versus the hardcore buyer? I think the casual buyer, I don't know.
Right, the casual, because the shelf space has dwindled, there's no more ubiquity of physical product, that, the shelf space has shrunk, the amount of storefronts carrying it has shrunk, that unless you're that super fan and you're seeking it, as opposed to being the general consumer who's gone out and you're shopping for toilet paper and toothbrush, and then all of a sudden you see a big rack of one of the hot things that you've heard on your AM radio.
But forget even going to buy a book. You used to be able to buy a CD, or you could walk into a store. You didn't have to be that big a music fan to walk into Tower Records, to walk into HMV. You have to have checked the box, I'm a big music fan, to start with most services nowadays.
Right. Yeah.
So we still think people hit those services and they hit iTunes, and maybe they're a really big indie rock fan, or maybe they're a really big country fan, but everybody seems to want a little bit of everything. So where do I start with classical? Where do I start with world? Where do I start with
how have you done that how do you start with classical?
We create products.
All right, so what are they?
50 most essential classical pieces of all time. Chicago blues, with beautiful artwork that works at a postage stamp, named in a way that people might discover it in a search and then understand what it is at a postage stamp. There's no luxury. There's not even the luxury of 10 seconds looking at the back cover. Whatever worked as an LP barely worked as a CD, and sure as heck doesn't work as a postage stamp.
So the discovery process is now based more on better SEO almost.
That's one part of it.
Yeah.
One part of it, but also people need to know if 8 things show up in front of them, you've got to fight whatever way you can to be one of those 8 things, whether it's SEO or marketing or promotions, other ways to drive it. But then you better be the one they click.
Right.
They're probably not clicking 2 or 3. So it better look right and they better know what it is. So we've got that part of it covered for people who are already in those stores.
Okay.
What the hell are you doing to solve the other part? To get the casual music people into the store? I can't solve that. That's up to you.
Right. No, that's true.
So what are you doing?
So what? Oh, now you're interviewing me. Cool. Well, one of the things that we try to do is really encourage the startup community to be able to have better access. And on our side, I think as a trade organization, our job is to help reduce expenses so people can spend their money more on consumer marketing rather than some of the internal problems that are faced by the business. If you're paying your royalties to the labels as a service, as a digital retail company, you have X amount of dollars to spend on marketing and infrastructure. And as an organization, we focused on reducing the costs of the operational side so that there can be more money to increase on the artist marketing side.
But so
and informational tools as well. The other thing that we're working on is actual SEO, because as DMCA notices are theoretically, although the RIAA may disagree, DMCA notices are driving down or de-emphasizing pirate sites in search engines. The other part of it is that the industry has to do a much better job at search engine optimization to increase that web of authenticity. So we're working sort of on the back end. It's a very subtle thing.
All smart, but see, I think one of the issues is all those startups you're talking about, so the music industry is populated with guys like you and me who love music so much we let it screw up our lives completely,
well,
right?
Yeah.
So you can't imagine somebody in the music business who isn't a mess from music hasn't made their life different than it would have been. But it seems like everybody in tech who's getting into it too, the reason nobody sensible would be going into music as opposed to something else.
No one with any sense.
So they're also love music so much they're letting it screw up their lives. So it's really hard for all these tech people who love music and these music people who love music to the point where it's everything to them to step back a second and say, so how am I going to build something for my sister?
Right.
How am I going to build a great platform to sell Paul Potts?
Right.
And that's what needs to happen because a lot of the people who we're talking about maybe don't know anybody who's a casual music fan, or they discount them if they do. And the casual music fan is getting left behind in digital. I'm doing what I can by creating products. So I'm making it. I don't know who's doing it on the other end, so I'm making it your responsibility.
Well, thank you.
So we'll check in the next time we see you at a conference, and I'll see how you're doing on that.
But that's great. I mean, scale is the greatest problem, and overcoming that barrier is one of the largest challenges that we have in the industry.
I worry that the scale is defined as how to sell more music to people who are now buying music, as opposed to how to sell how to get people digital who aren't digital and aren't big music
Let's
fans.
talk about one success story. Move Music, right? Cricket Wireless, month-to-month carrier. Heretofore music buyers that were not contributing anything to the music economy, but converted large swaths of month-to-month customers to being digital subscribers. I think that the Cricket service, based on the fact that they have now achieved an interesting scale with a marketplace that are actively musically engaged but not actively music purchasers, that's the kind of level up. We're trying to, and I think that service, because it's bundled and included, it has demonstrated a lot of success in moving that forward. So it's the question of doing that stuff. So that's
good that you got
so that's one of the things that the retail community is doing, is figuring out better paths to enable slightly engaged people to level up to become more actively engaged in the music consumption. You know, with respect to.
And what are you doing this week?
Well, this week I'm nursing my hangover. And enjoying the festivities at our booth here.
Well,
at South
that
by
is one
Southwest.
thing different about South by as you get older. You might need to drink less. You might need to take a few less mushrooms. I haven't ended up naked in public or in drag 7 or 8 years, which I think is a good thing. So there are some differences in that way. I hope there's still kids out there getting too drunk and taking mushrooms and running through the streets naked, but it
no more.
Not for me anymore.
Excellent. So very quickly to end up, I know we have like another couple of minutes. Tell us about your panel tomorrow.
My panel is on the artist's place in the digital revenue stream. And it's actually a panel I conceived of and put together because I'm curious about, I've managed an artist for 26 years, managed a lot of artists. I've been at 2 retailers, and a lot of headlines about how much do artists make at Spotify versus Rhapsody versus iTunes. And I'm not sure why we're having that discussion, because artists don't have deals with those. Even if it's a direct deal, it's still a label. And I'm just, what I want to compare to, I never remember a conversation, how much does an artist make from a sale at Tower versus HMV versus Walmart? So why is that a discussion we're having in digital, and is it relevant? I don't know the answer, actually. So I put a panel together with Jeff Price and Eric Garland and Trevor Skeet from Spotify, and we'll figure out, I want to learn from the panel, is that a relevant conversation? And if it is, what can artists do about it? If it isn't, what should artists be thinking about? But what do I, the artist, make from Spotify seems very similar to what do I, the artist, make from Tower Records, and that was never a part of the discussion. So is it different and it's relevant, or is it not?
Cool. Well, I think that's all the time that we have for today. So I'd like to thank you for your time.
Well, thanks.
And
thanks
I'd like
to LiveMusicStage for having us.
And the Austin Tech Talk community. and we'll see you around. Thanks.